My beloved child. Your soulmate's family has been talking about you, but not in the way you might expect. Something changed recently, and your name entered a conversation that was never supposed to reach you. At first, it sounded casual. One person asked a simple question about who your soulmate had been thinking about lately. But the room became unusually quiet, because everyone already seemed to know the answer. Your soulmate didn't have to say your name. Their expression said enough. And then someone in the family revealed that they had noticed something strange. Whenever your name comes up, your soulmate becomes a completely different person. Their voice softens. Their attention shifts. Even when they try to hide what they feel, the people closest to them can see it. But here is where the conversation became serious. One family member asked a question your soulmate wasn't prepared to answer. If this person means so much to you, why are you still pretending they don't? Your soulmate went silent, and what happened after that is exactly why you need to keep listening. Because that silence told the family more than any explanation could have. They realized this wasn't some temporary attraction your soulmate could simply forget. There was history beneath it. Emotion. Something unfinished. And one person at that table apparently understood more than the others. They had been quietly watching your soulmate for a long time, noticing the moments when they seemed distant, the nights when they withdrew into themselves, and the strange way their mood changed whenever relationships or the future were mentioned. Then this person finally connected everything back to you. But instead of criticizing your soulmate, they surprised everyone by defending the connection. They said there had to be a reason you were still affecting your soulmate after all this time. Think about that for a moment. What would make someone who barely knows the full story recognize that you still matter? Don't skip, because the answer begins with something your soulmate apparently said about you when they believed nobody would take it seriously, and those words changed the entire direction of the family conversation. Your soulmate admitted that there is something about you they have never been able to replace. They may have tried to distract themselves, listen to other people, or convince themselves that moving forward would eventually make the feeling disappear. But it didn't. And when their family heard this, the conversation stopped being about whether you mattered and became about what your soulmate intended to do about it. One relative wanted them to leave the past alone. Another quietly disagreed. Then someone asked the question that seemed to shake your soulmate the most: what if they're waiting for you to finally be honest? Suddenly, your soulmate was forced to consider something they had avoided for far too long. What if you didn't need perfection from them? What if you only needed the truth? Stay till the end, because there is another reason their family is suddenly discussing you now, and it has nothing to do with old memories. Something recently happened that made your soulmate speak about you differently, and when one family member discovered exactly what it was, they made an unexpected suggestion that could change what happens between you next. That unexpected suggestion caught your soulmate completely off guard. One family member looked directly at them and said that if their feelings for you were still this strong, they needed to stop hiding behind uncertainty and finally decide what they wanted. But there was another detail. Apparently, your soulmate had recently mentioned something about you that they had never admitted so openly before. They described a moment when they realized that losing contact, creating distance, or pretending to move forward had not brought the peace they expected. Instead, ordinary things kept reminding them of you, a familiar phrase, a place, even conversations about the future. Their family noticed the emotion in their voice immediately. Then someone asked, "Are you afraid they've already moved on?" Your soulmate hesitated. That hesitation revealed the fear underneath everything. They don't simply miss you. They're wondering whether they waited too long. And one person in the family saw that fear clearly enough to challenge them in a way nobody else had dared. They asked your soulmate to imagine discovering that you had finally closed the door. No dramatic goodbye. No argument. Just the realization that you had stopped waiting for clarity and chosen peace instead. Your soulmate's reaction surprised everyone. They became defensive at first, insisting that nobody truly understood what had happened between you. But then their voice changed. They admitted there were things they wished they had handled differently. Words they should have spoken. Moments when they should have been braver instead of allowing confusion and outside opinions to control their decisions. That confession changed how certain relatives viewed you, because they had previously heard only fragments of the story. Now they were beginning to understand that perhaps you weren't the reason things became complicated. Perhaps your soulmate had been fighting their own feelings all along. And then a family member asked one simple question: if you could speak to them tonight without fear, what would you say? Your soulmate's answer was so personal that the room went completely still. But they didn't begin with, "I miss you." They said something much more revealing: would tell them the truth about why I pulled away. That sentence opened an entirely new mystery, because apparently the distance between you was never as simple as it appeared. Your soulmate admitted that family expectations, fear of making the wrong decision, and their own uncertainty had influenced choices they now question. Yet there was one particular conversation from the past that affected them more deeply than anyone realized. Someone had said something about you, and your soulmate believed it without ever giving you the opportunity to explain yourself. Now, after everything that has happened, they're beginning to suspect they were given only one side of the story. Their family wants to know the truth too. And the person who originally raised the subject of you suddenly became unusually quiet when that old conversation was mentioned. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate noticed that silence, and they immediately asked a question nobody in the family was prepared to answer. Your soulmate finally turned toward the person who had gone quiet and asked, "What exactly did you know about them that you never told me?" The question changed the atmosphere instantly. Nobody expected the conversation to become this direct, especially because this relative had always acted as though their opinion about you came from concern. At first, they tried to dismiss it as an old misunderstanding. But your soulmate wasn't willing to let it disappear that easily. They remembered how certain warnings about you had once sounded strangely confident, even though nobody had ever shown them anything concrete. Now those old words suddenly felt different. Another family member stepped in and admitted they had questioned the story from the beginning. Why? Because they had seen how genuine your soulmate became whenever they spoke about you before outside opinions complicated everything. And for the first time, your soulmate began wondering whether the distance between you had grown from assumptions that were never completely true. Then came a detail nobody expected. The relative who had defended you revealed that they had recently heard something that contradicted what the family had believed about you. It wasn't some dramatic rumor. It was something more believable, and therefore harder to ignore. They learned that during the period when your soulmate thought you had stopped caring, you may actually have been protecting your own heart because you believed your soulmate had already chosen a different path. Suddenly, two completely different versions of the same story existed in that room. Your soulmate had believed you walked away because your feelings weren't strong enough. You may have believed they pulled away because you were no longer wanted. What happens when two people care deeply but both interpret silence as rejection? Your soulmate seemed shaken by that possibility, because it meant years of emotional distance could have grown from one painful misunderstanding. But there was still one missing piece. That missing piece became the reason their family kept talking about you even after your soulmate left the room. Some relatives now believed your soulmate should reach out and discover the truth directly from you. Others worried that reopening the connection could bring back emotions your soulmate had worked hard to contain. Yet one person said something nobody could dismiss: "Look at how they reacted tonight. This was never finished." Those words apparently stayed with your soulmate. Later, alone, they kept replaying everything: the questions, the conflicting stories, and especially the possibility that you had misunderstood their silence just as badly as they misunderstood yours. Don't skip, because your soulmate is no longer asking whether they still have feelings for you. That answer has become painfully obvious. Now they're asking something much more important: if they finally came to you with the full truth, would you even believe them? And before they can decide what to do, one family member is preparing to reveal what was actually said about you all that time ago. The family member finally revealed what had been said about you, and your soulmate immediately realized one important detail had been left out all along. Years ago, they were told that you were becoming distant because your feelings had changed. They heard that you wanted something different, that waiting for you would only lead to disappointment, and that continuing to hold on would make them look foolish. But now this relative admitted those words had never come directly from you. They were assumptions built from what other people thought your silence meant. Your soulmate stared at them in disbelief. "So you never actually heard that from them?" they asked. The answer was no. And suddenly, your soulmate understood that one of the biggest decisions they made about you had been influenced by a story nobody had ever confirmed. But the confession didn't stop there, because another family member knew why that assumption had been presented as certainty. Apparently, the family had been worried about how emotionally invested your soulmate had become. They saw someone who was thinking about you constantly, imagining a future with you, and becoming vulnerable in a way they had rarely seen before. Some relatives feared that if things went wrong, your soulmate would be devastated. So instead of encouraging them to speak honestly with you, they encouraged distance. They thought they were protecting someone they loved. But now, seeing that your soulmate still carries those feelings, even they are beginning to question whether their protection caused more pain than the relationship itself ever did. One relative quietly said, "Maybe we should have let you make your own choice." That sentence hit differently. Your soulmate didn't become angry. They became quiet. Because they suddenly remembered one particular moment when they almost reached out to you, and changed their mind after listening to the family. Stay with this, because what they admitted about that moment surprised everyone. Your soulmate revealed that they had actually prepared something they wanted to say to you. Not a casual message. Not some vague attempt to see whether you still cared. They had planned to tell you exactly what they felt and ask whether there was still something worth saving between you. But before they could send it, they spoke with someone in the family who convinced them that contacting you would only reopen a door you had already closed. So they deleted the message. Until now, nobody else in the family knew it had ever existed. And when they heard what your soulmate had intended to say, even the relative who once encouraged them to move on seemed shaken. Because the message contained one sentence your soulmate apparently still remembers almost word for word. Something huge is waiting for you, because that sentence explains why your name has suddenly become impossible for their family to ignore, and why one person now believes your soulmate needs to tell you what they almost told you back then. The sentence your soulmate still remembers was simple, but it exposed everything they had been hiding. I don't know what happens next, but I know I don't want to lose you because I was too afraid to speak. When those words were repeated in front of the family, nobody interrupted. Even the person who had once encouraged distance seemed to understand what that deleted message truly represented. Your soulmate hadn't been trying to pull you back into confusion. They had been trying to finally become honest. And now they were facing the painful realization that fear made the decision for them before you ever had the chance to respond. One relative asked why they still remembered that exact sentence after so much time. Your soulmate looked down and admitted, "Because I still mean it." That was the moment the conversation stopped being about the past. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know what your soulmate planned to do now. But your soulmate didn't immediately say they would contact you. Instead, they admitted another fear, one their family hadn't considered. What if reaching out now only disturbs the peace you fought hard to rebuild? What if you see their honesty as something that came too late? That question divided the room again. One relative believed they should respect your silence and leave everything alone. Another argued that you deserved to know the truth, even if nothing came from it. Then the family member who had originally defended you said something that made your soulmate freeze. You keep deciding what they feel without asking them. Isn't that how this happened the first time? Nobody had an answer. Because that was exactly the pattern. Assumptions had created the distance before, and now fear was threatening to create it again. Your soulmate realized they were standing at the same emotional crossroads, but this time, they knew what silence had already cost them. Later, your soulmate apparently returned to the conversation with a completely different question. They didn't ask whether the family approved of you. They asked what each person genuinely remembered about the way they used to speak about you. The answer surprised them. One remembered how excited they became after hearing from you. Another remembered how protective they were of your privacy. Someone else admitted they had never seen your soulmate talk about another connection with the same mixture of happiness and fear. But then the oldest person in the conversation revealed something nobody else knew. Long before the distance between you began, your soulmate had privately told them what they imagined their future could look like if things ever worked out with you. Don't skip, because that old conversation contained a detail your soulmate had apparently never shared with anyone else, and when the family heard it now, they finally understood why forgetting you had never truly been an option. That private conversation had happened long before anyone realized how deeply your soulmate cared about you. They had quietly admitted that when they imagined a peaceful future, you were somehow part of it, not because everything between you was perfect, but because being understood by you felt different. They had even wondered what it would be like for you to become part of their family someday. Hearing those words repeated now stunned the room. Your soulmate had spent so long acting uncertain that some relatives assumed their feelings had never been serious. But this changed that completely. One family member asked, if you could picture a future with them then, what changed? Your soulmate didn't blame you. They didn't blame timing either. They admitted that the closer the connection felt, the more frightened they became of losing it. And that fear made other people's doubts easier to believe. But then came another question they couldn't avoid. If fear separated you once, what would stop it from happening again? This time, your soulmate answered differently. They said they were tired of allowing other people to interpret your feelings for them. If they ever spoke to you again, they wanted the truth to come directly from you, even if that truth was difficult to hear. That answer surprised the family, especially those who had expected your soulmate to remain trapped between regret and hesitation. Something had shifted. They weren't asking permission anymore. They were trying to understand how to approach you without repeating the same mistakes. Then one relative offered an unexpected piece of advice: don't return with promises, explanations, or expectations. Start with accountability. Tell you what happened, admit what they misunderstood, and let you decide what comes next. Your soulmate became quiet again, because those words reminded them of something else, something they had kept from the family throughout this entire conversation. There was already a reason they believed you might still be willing to hear them. And this is where the family's curiosity became even stronger. Your soulmate admitted that recently, something connected to you had resurfaced. It wasn't enough to prove how you feel today, but it was enough to make them question whether the story between you ended the way they had convinced themselves it did. They had come across an old reminder of a moment between you, something containing words they had interpreted completely differently at the time. Reading it again with everything they now understood made one detail impossible to ignore. Maybe you hadn't been saying goodbye at all. Maybe you had been waiting for your soulmate to show you that staying mattered to them. When the family asked to hear exactly what those words were, your soulmate hesitated. Not because they had forgotten them, but because saying them aloud would reveal just how badly they may have misunderstood you. And when they finally began repeating what you had said, one relative recognized something your soulmate still hadn't noticed. The relative stopped your soulmate halfway through and asked them to repeat your words slowly. Your soulmate did, and suddenly the meaning sounded completely different. What they had once interpreted as you pulling away now sounded like someone asking for reassurance without demanding it. You hadn't been saying, "I'm done." You had been protecting yourself while leaving a small door open for honesty. That realization visibly unsettled your soulmate. They remembered how quickly they had accepted the worst interpretation because it matched what everyone around them was already saying. But this relative heard something else in your words: disappointment, yes, but also hope.